So this month it's Growth and Development Month, and we're bringing in lots of people who are talking all about growing up, childhood, going through childhood, but actually growing and developing as adults as well. We're continuously going through phases of growth. We're always learning new things. We're always developing, and with the seasons, if you look out the window now, you know, spring really is on its way, and things are growing and things are developing. And I'm delighted to have Laura Hellfeld on the show tonight. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the show.
That's such a great way to spend some of my day. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Laura is a nurse. She's actually a nurse consultant, and she's just about to qualify as a sleep practitioner as well. She's a children's yoga teacher, and she's the founder of Kokopies Families. And Kokopies Families supports parents, supports caregivers, to have a better healthy happy life and better mental well-being. She specifically focuses on and specializes in working with children who are neurodivergent, or children who've, you know, really been through a very tough time and perhaps had quite a lot of trauma, either through birth or as a result of a situation or circumstances in their lives. And she reaches a multitude of families and a multitude of people, and helps children and families to better connect and communicate with each other. She teaches really powerful, amazing strategies that families and kids can use so that they are connecting and communicating better with each other, and that everybody is encouraging each other and raising each other up, in particular those younger children. So thank you for coming on the show. I couldn't have asked for a better guest on Growth and Development Month than you.
Like introduce me for every event I do. Oh, it's fantastic.
So tell us about Kokopies Families, and how did it start? This is amazing.
It's something that I never knew I'd be getting into. I always worked with adults, and whenever there was rotations with children and pediatrics, I found it actually too hard. And so I would kind of go around the corner where they would be passing out those rotations, just kind of hide away and let other people have the pediatrics. And so my friends now that knew me then think it's hilarious that now I really focus in on with children. And it really all came from the name, is my two boys' nicknames put together. And it's really because of them. It was realizing that my oldest son is autistic. My younger one's ADHD. And then through them,
wow,
feels like
that's a handful in your house.
And I just knew nothing about it. I knew absolutely nothing about it, despite having a science background, a research background, a nurse background. I knew absolutely nothing behind it, and it felt big and scary. I didn't know where to turn. First resources, not very good. And so I started realizing we needed, as the parents, to really step in and say, right, what are we going to do here? Because it felt like we were just behind, like we were just trying to catch up to things that were upsetting, especially our oldest at the time, versus understanding and versus how do we communicate, because we don't just communicate verbally. He's communicating so many other ways that we were never taught to be really as in tune with. And then through all of this and realizing, like, why is this so upsetting to me? Why is this so upsetting to you? We realize so much more about ourselves. And then, as you said about this developing as an adult, my goodness, my last year, I decided to go through my own assessments then, and which I don't think you have to as an adult. I did really to validate what I do for work now, and also to understand what I don't like about the process, so I can make changes.
Yeah.
So verified for myself.
So you've been going through your own growth and development process recently too. Yeah.
I had to go back and basically look at my childhood and growing up and currently. And yes, so I am a very proud autistic ADHD woman. And so I use that as the basis of all of this work, is understanding, oh, wow, I didn't know all these things about me, but I've learned all these ways of coping and strategizing and communicating. but in a lot of it was I've kept to myself because I didn't realize, I knew it was different, and maybe then was a bit embarrassed or ashamed or whatever and didn't know. But actually then it's really what helps me to connect with my children. And then I realized I was helping other friends do the same for their children. And then I was wondering what to do about work, and people kept going, maybe this is what you should do for work. But I
So how
wasn't.
old are your boys now? How old are your boys?
My oldest is 6 and my youngest is 3.
So
So
6 years ago, you had a beautiful baby boy.
yep.
Uh,
And just
and tell me a
have.
little bit about that journey to kind of discovering that that you had a child who was neurodiverse. And please correct me if I use the wrong terminology, because
And thank you for that.
neurodiverse is a word that I've recently come across, and it kind of like it's a beautiful way of encompassing all different things. Tell me a little bit more about that terminology
Okay,
before
absolutely.
you answer that question.
Let me
Sorry to
always start off
diverge.
with that. And
Yeah.
thank you for asking, because actually language, I've realized, is kind of my way in with the different groups, because I also do practitioner training and educating at schools as well. And I always say, if we kind of take a step back and think about the language, it really shapes how you then can think of me and think of the children. And then it almost seems almost so easy then what decision to make. So I
Mm.
had never heard of neurodiversity. It's not, it's been around for a couple decades. And really it's this umbrella term of understanding that we talk about human diversity, but we haven't really discussed as much about how we all can think and process differently. And that's all it means, is that we all have these different brains and we're
Mm.
all here for different reasons. If we all thought the same way, we couldn't solve problems differently. We couldn't be creative in different ways.
Yeah.
But you
We all
got beauty.
perceive our world in different ways as well. I mean, I I work with a lot of people who suffer with terrible stress and anxiety. And, for somebody who feels quite anxious most days, a simple phone call, can be really scary. The phone rings. Who is it? What's going to happen? Who's on the other end? Is it going to be bad news? Can I cope with this conversation?
Oh yes, is it going to be
Can I
bad news?
answer this telephone? By the time they've gone through this whole process, the phone's rang off, and then they're anxious because they didn't answer the phone.
Right.
Whereas a lot of people, the phone ring, they just pick the phone up and answer the phone.
Let me think
We
about it.
just respond, don't we? We have different perceptions of
Yes.
our world. So I love that there's this new terminology that really kind of frames that idea that we
Yes.
all see the world, we all experience the world yes, we all experience it through our senses, our sight, our sound, our touch. We all experience it through our senses, but we experience it differently to each other
Yes.
through our senses, and that's really exciting. So I love the terminology neurodiverse. I think I'm definitely neurodiverse, more so on a Wednesday and a Thursday than I am any other day. I'm definitely neurodiverse. So sorry, so you had this beautiful baby boy, and then tell me a little bit about that.
We had him in LA, and then we moved a couple months after that here to beautiful, shiny England, Northern England. It's rare
It's very
shiny.
green and gorgeous here, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
And the
it-
people of the north are just so friendly, and welcoming. I hope you felt that warmth
why
as
we
you.
haven't left.
Yeah.
It became a very easy place to kind of settle in and have outdoor time. It really is a really lovely place to be. And so I had the time off of work, which I would not have had in the States because of maternity leave.
Of
And so we
course.
just thought, we were going to come out for a year. Let's do that. And then I decided to extend on, thinking, because maybe we'll have a second kid. I can stay off, do that, and then we'll go back. And there were there were things cropping up that he had anxiety at, but I just didn't quite understand.
Mm.
And people would say, well, it's just a tantrum. I go, gosh, it just seems intense. It seemed like really intense at times. And there wasn't quite a pattern to it. And now I look back, I'm like, oh, he going into that place, it was probably so overwhelmingly loud, but but as the adult, it wasn't to me, because I knew where we were walking in. He was 2, but I'm in my 30s and knew where I was going, what adults would be there, and what the expectations were. He didn't. and it would just be this loud echoing place. So he'd be having a
Yeah.
meltdown, not a tantrum. And I just
Can
didn't
feel
understand.
like you're being assaulted, can't it, with that
Yeah.
kind of
And so
sound?
I just had no idea. So we were having that a little bit. And we knew that his speech was coming on, but a little bit slower. So we were just doing some of the drop-in singing. So I wasn't worried about it. And I knew we had time. That's fine. And then it was really when his brother was born, I think, because that was obviously a massive change, a
Mm.
whole new person in the house. And so he hadn't had really kind of patterns of behavior of how he liked things done, routines, really strict on any of that until his brother was born. I think just because that threw such a wrench into everything. And as you know, there's nothing routine about a newborn. And so I was,
Definitely not.
I would be in every room at some point in time and night and day, and breastfeedings whenever, and
Wow.
tired and napping. And so it throws everything off. And I think because it threw everything off, he desperately needed to try to control it. And I wasn't used to that. And he had been so easygoing, and it felt like, but this just feels like he's so anxious. What not even 3-year-old needs to do this? And then it kind of really all started coming to light, and you start to think about some other family members, and you start to think about some friends. And then we just went, I just think he's autistic. And that makes everything come to light. It's not all these separate things that we're having difficulties with. It's all rooted in he's really anxious about the situation right now. And now we need help on learning with a very young child how to help him understand that he's still safe. We still love him. He's still very connected. And when can he have control of things but be safe? Like with being out of the house, that was a big one.
Mm.
And really, I would say, unfortunately, during that time is when I just didn't know where to turn, and I didn't know who to be talking to. I didn't know who to get advice from, because it turns out later on you realize, oh, a lot of people were quite fanatical and made things very, very scary and said things that made me feel really isolated and alone.
So, like, what sort of things? Obviously, was this from other parents, or was it from other professionals?
Friends, professionals, it was quite everybody. And a lot comes from it, again, of thinking that language, like, well, he has autism, so he's gonna be anxious. And I'd be like, well, hang on. Like, I feel like he's not destined to be this. What can we do?
It's the
I'm not
problem
gonna
with labeling, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and so what I say to people is, so I'm autistic. It's not if you think of it as labeling that way, then yes, because it's something you want to take away. But
Mm.
my identity, just like I am a woman, I don't want that taken away. I just need to know how to be the healthiest version of a woman I can. So I'm autistic, and now I need to just understand what does that mean for how I think and want things to how I want to go about my day to day to make sure that I feel healthy, safe, and taken care of. And so it's not something I want to be taken away. When I make sure it's from my when thinking of that neurodiversity umbrella, then it's this identity that I have. And so therefore it's more respectful of the person and thinking, right, so you're this person, but how do we help you feel the safest,
I
healthiest?
think a lot of parents who are going through similar things, if they're spotting things with their children that they're seeing are not the same as other kids, or they're noticing that their child is reacting in a way that they don't feel is similar to other children. It's quite scary. And sometimes that label can bring a sense of comfort almost. And that label can give you access to services and support from places, but also that label can sometimes prevent you from moving forward. It can prevent you. It can
Exactly.
stop you in your
Exactly.
tracks, and it can become a negative thing as well. So
Yes.
I love the idea of neurodiversity. As we're not a person who has autism. We're somebody who is looking to live the best life that they can, just in the same way anybody else is. We just might need some additional help in this way.
Exactly. So when
I
we
love
take fear from it, it allows the other parents. And I would say this is one of my biggest barriers in my work is that worry of, well, if there's been so much fear about in the media and the posts that are on Facebook and social media about why are there more autistic people, and labeling it an epidemic, and these poor children, then of course you don't want your child to be a part of that. And so
Mm.
you pretend it's not happening, you bury your head, you kind of just try to get through every moment by moment by moment, versus now knowing and try, that's who I'm trying to reach and be like, actually, we don't need to think of it as this catastrophic event at all. It's just, we just happen to be different. We might talk a bit later. It turns out I actually talked later. And not that everyone has to talk, but just going into, we all develop at these different times. So it doesn't have to be a scary thing. And just trying to help be another voice out there. So that way, if there is a parent that's going, then we can teach, this is probably the thought process then behind why your child's doing this. Therefore, make decisions and helping them feel less anxious than in the situation, or decide this just isn't somewhere your child enjoys being. And so that's why I want to reach people, because I think if we don't help with identifying us, we end up going through so much unnecessary anxiety. And then it feels like the parent ends up just trying to catch up to that anxiety versus learning how their child thinks and helping them just build their day.
It's helping them see who they are and what the good aspects of them are as well, and bringing those out. I know that I as an adult, or as a young adult, I was diagnosed, assessed, I'm not quite sure what the terminology is, as having visual dyslexia. And once I knew what it was, and somebody said, and this is kind of what you can't, these are the characteristics of that, it made me feel great, because I was like, that's why sometimes I read things and my brain doesn't process it. That's sometimes why I have to read things several times for my brain to process it. But what they did say was that I had, as a result of having this as a drawback, other skills that I had massively developed, and it meant that I was actually really good at other things, and it was great because it helped me to really focus on the things that I was good at, the things that I enjoyed, the things that I loved, and I was able to get support in the areas where I was struggling a little bit, mostly with technology. Computers became, using a computer whilst I was at university studying psychology. It was so good to be able to record the lectures so I could take them away and listen again and again and again, because I wasn't great at note taking. So listening and speaking, funnily enough, became areas of were areas that I was really good at. Writing stuff down, not so. It's but it meant that I could really focus on the areas I needed that support in, and really enjoy the bits that I was good at.
What
and
a
that's what it's all
confidence
about.
booster.
Amazing confidence booster. But up until that point,
Beautiful.
my confidence was pretty low, and I didn't understand why I couldn't do what other people could do, and it was quite frustrating.
Very, very frustrating.
So yeah, I get that importance. So your work is on with all families, and about bringing better communication within the families, and providing strategies. But you really focus on autistic and neurodivergent support. Have you seen an increase in the numbers of children who are having these kinds of issues? And do you think there's enough support out there?
I think the rise in numbers is simply that we're becoming more and more open to recognizing differences versus thinking every child has to learn the same. And then once you're kind of in tune with, like, I see myself and so many other women going around, and I see in all the schools and classrooms, there's just so many unidentified, where if somebody who could pick up on some of the traits, and so there's tons of kids and adults going around that just have been unidentified. So it's not an epidemic. It's just simply that we're more knowledgeable. And then as I've gone back and been chatting with my family and extended family, we all go, oh, I remember grandma. I her brother. And, you know, realizing a lot of the quirks and that we've all been like this forever. And we've needed to be in order to evolve all together as humanity, because again, we needed people to think of things and evolve our ways. And we continue to need that as we change and come up with new ideas. And so I just think we're just better at seeing it. And I know I see it all the time. And I think it's just trying to get people to be open to, and that's okay. It seems like we tend to be growing in that we're okay, that we're diverse, but then all of a sudden there's like, oh, but not that way. Because I think we're still getting comfortable with the idea, because when we talk about our children, it comes back at us. And like that was a really big step of, if there's so much genetics behind my autistic kid, obviously where did he get his genetics? So then it kind of keeps flowing back and back and back. And again, when you think of it from the neurodiversity standpoint, it's a positive way of thinking about it. When you think of it, this ASD, this diagnosis, this disorder, this disease, of course it doesn't involve you. So then it began with your child, and it stops there. So therefore, you do see it as this epidemic of why are all these children, versus ever allowing yourself to be part of it.
So it's like a genetic flow right throughout your whole family, all the different influences, the kind of nurture nature influences.
I have yet
as
to be
well.
with a family where there, so sorry. I haven't been in a family where there hasn't been that ping of with the dad or the mom going, oh, okay, yes, we do the exact same thing. I've just learned to cope with it this way. And then we go, oh, okay. So the family action plans I put in are really family action plans. And I might have gone in for one child, but the family action plans or the bedtime routines and stuff, it's everybody, because it's rare that it's just this child who has sensory needs. It's rare that there's somebody that doesn't need a lot of movement before bedtime. And actually the child I came in for, it's related to the energy of the sibling who's an ADHD and didn't get to regulate that movement, now is at bedtime. So it's really the family action plans. And so again, and I try to create a really open and inviting space when the parents come in, because of knowing there's going to be a process they might not have realized of needing to think about themselves. And I try to hold that really, really positively, because it can be really hard to have to think about yourself and ways maybe,
so your kind of work helps people to see these behavioral traits, these ways that the kids go about in a really positive light, but it kind of mirrors and reflect, and you help families to reflect as well on perhaps that mum does this too, dad does this too. It's kind of in your genes, it's genetic and it's environmental. It's a kind of combination of things. And then you go in and provide families with strategies so that together they can improve. Amazing. And kind of what sort of strategies have you implemented in your own life that have been really helpful for you?
I think the biggest thing was years ago, getting involved into mindfulness and yoga. It began to be offered through work, some free drop-ins. And I realized, so I worked in mainly intensive care and then dropped in and out of ER. So very emotional places, very fast paced. And I realized quickly that I wasn't going to be able to emotionally recover and do the best for my patients. And I always volunteered for hospice. And so it just felt like I'd be going from these huge emotional scenarios, one to the other very quickly. So I got involved in creating practices, learning from others and bringing them into my day-to-day. And then that was the real big,
so that you could manage your own emotions.
And I didn't realize at the time, but there was a lot of sensory regulation with that now I'm so much more aware of, with being aware of who I am. And that's really.
So what sort of sensory regulation did you implement?
For me, it's a lot of movement. I have to let go of some of the sensory input by moving.
So
So
yoga for you is
I
good.
like Kundalini yoga is really great because
I love a dance. I like to shake it off.
yeah. Oh, definitely put on so, and you just need to like kind of let it go. The big
Yeah.
deep lion breaths of just like, oh, that was so much sound.
Brilliant.
Like, ugh. So that's why I ended up getting the children's yoga training, because I realized so much of what I teach families. I have a huge science background, science theory, but I also bring in a huge amount of the tenets from yoga and mindfulness. And
I
it's
love
quite
it.
a combination of that and explaining it from both sides, because sometimes people go, mindfulness, I don't know. And then I'm like, well, but if we think about the stress system and how your child's waking up every 30 minutes, here's a way of helping let go some of that anxiety throughout the day, and here's a way to
Amazing.
build in for all the hormones to be balanced, but do it from a way that you can do it as the parent without all these other interventions. And also the child can learn it, and that way they can be going to school and practicing themselves in between classes. It's just life skills, really.
And we had Jill on the show a couple of weeks ago now, who's a Kundalini yoga teacher here in Shields, and she runs classes from the Westo practice. And I can't remember the name of the church, but there's a church as well where she runs them from. And we were talking about the power of mantras and how by making that sound, that can be such a release as well. So singing, mantras, affirmations, making those kind of lion roar sounds in the
Yeah.
yoga, movement and dancing, those are all things that you've started to do that have really, really helped you, like real powerful strategies to
Massive.
manage your emotions,
Yeah.
and that feeling of massive overwhelm that you get if you are neurodiverse. So what other strategies have you brought into place?
I would say the big one, and I'm doing a talk on this for NIPAC in a couple weeks, at their AGM event. And it has to do with, I realize the positive of the way my autistic brain likes to think of the day in boxes. And I go between these different boxes. And
Oh, I'm a box person.
the psychologist is like, you do what? And I'm like, oh, I guess not everybody else thinks of their day that way. And it can have the limitations so far as if I don't finish one, it can feel really upsetting to go on to the next. Get
Yeah,
something.
I'm the same. I like to finish that box off, and I actually like to go tick it off. I've got them on the wall.
Yes, yes.
Got
So,
like charts all over the house.
yeah.
People come around the house and think I'm weird, but I'm quite a busy person and I like to be
And you have
organised. So I've got every bill that needs to be paid, every
absolutely,
event that's happening, every person I'm speaking to.
absolutely.
Don't get in my
Lots
box.
of
It's not
energy,
happening.
absolutely.
It's
So
so weird. I need to put you in my box.
it's just great self-awareness, isn't it? And knowing what you need to
Yeah.
get through the day. And so what I used was knowing how I like to do that, the tenet from yoga of prahar, of segmentation. And prahar is more about
Oh,
3
I
hours,
love it.
but I teach families, but segments for your child might be 5 minutes, it might be a 3 minute, it might be an hour. Um, let's try to think of, and so we build in, and we've built in action plans around it about where are really tricky times. We want to think of the whole day like this, and even night if they're up at night.
Yeah.
Let's think of the really tricky bits and break it down into all these teeny tiny segments, because then you actually, and then I show the strategies of how you begin each segment, what you do at each one, and how you build onto the next one and create all this momentum with maintaining lots of respect for the child, because it's giving them very, very, very ongoing opportunities to regulate, or
Mm,
to communicate, whether that's by talking or by some sort of communication with their body of like pushing something away, or just, not doing something. So that way, you can really break down what's upsetting here. When families will say, I just don't even know why they get so upset, then in the morning routine is probably the most popular to really break
mm.
down. Why is there always a screaming and fighting? And then we really break down into all these little boxes and say, okay, it's this thing about putting on shoes. Maybe if there's a lot of traits of ADHD going on here, if you have an ADHD, they might not be able to visualize what that actually looks like. And so what we might need to do for that segment or this morning routine. And as we've broken down all the segments, there might be just a segment in your brain of shoes, which means right before that, we need to invite the child in to that segment, which is usually only like a minute, asking them, how do they feel about that? I have some strategies of how to help with oppositional behavior. And then visuals, you might need visuals, you might need cues, you might need then to be discussing with them, what is it, talking ahead of time, like, what is it about this? And so that way, if you're not leaving the house with this child that you basically just had to force shoes on again, and leaving and getting to school, because that emotion is going to come out at some point. And so then also teaching lots of regulating. So maybe knowing that there's a trace in ADHD, or maybe before asking for shoes, really back it up and have them do something active really quick. Make a funny game out of doing do the 10 most ridiculous jumping jacks you can think of, because that movement is really energizing. It gets dopamine going, which is for critical thinking and making decisions and emotional regulation.
Get
And
a bit
therefore,
dopamine, get a bit of serotonin going, feeling good.
Possible before this segment that's tricky. And then so we could be doing this I realized with our oldest, I must have in my brain had, I don't even know how many dozens of segments, but now through time, we've learned so much about how to flow through, and we know how to regulate a lot more. And because we're all about regulating ourselves, it's just all over the house. So you're always invited to be regulating, whether it's to sit with the tongue drum or the rain stick, or you're just doing your Legos or a squishy fidget toy. You find that you don't have to put as much thought and brain power into them, but that takes time.
I love that idea of regulation. I love that whole philosophy, if you like, because it brings about acceptance. It allows your brain to build mechanisms for doing things. The child can feel pleased with themselves and happy with themselves as well. It gives them a space to reflect on how well they're doing, and that's important. And I was talking to someone the other week who was saying that they've stopped saying well done to their child. They now say thank you, because well done can sound patronizing, and we don't want to patronize our kids. We want to empower them. We want them to have resilience, and the only way that we can do that is to bring that self-regulation. I think that space to do that is so important. And then they can assimilate, like you say, like the building blocks of how to deal with putting your shoes on.
Yes, and you just can flow into the next segment, and it really, again, it's a life skill of, they can then, as if they go through life, if they go to university, they go to trade school, if they have a job, then knowing, oh wait, I'm feeling this way, that means I should go get a cup of water. And taking that moment before I go to the meeting, and just it's always those pauses and pauses and pauses. And I talk a lot about having to think about the physical needs at all those segments, in the middle segments, because we don't tend to feel as much of our insides. It's a skill that actually needs to be taught a bit more of, when do I need to go to the bathroom? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I cold? Am I hot? But all those things affect how I'm actually feeling, like my mood. And so we need to help our kids. I've realized I tend to eat much more based off of social cues. So then now, as I work by myself, I have to set timers. And actually, I'm a very hungry person because I move a lot, because I'm also an ADHDer. I have to wake up with movement. Otherwise, I can't think. I add in mini movement stuff for myself, like that segments between who I work with. So I use a lot of energy. So I need to eat a lot of energy. But what will happen is I could go all day, and actually I am really, really hungry. And I've realized it's caused a headache. I'm a bit grumpier. I'm obviously having blood sugar drops, but I don't feel hunger the same way that most other people do. And so I'm trying to help parents realizing, like, we might be experiencing blood sugar drop here. Their bladder might be really full. So at each segment, also be teaching them of, how are we doing here? Do you want to push on your tummy? How does it feel?
Self-reflection, checking in with your body and working out, listening to what your body's saying.
Yeah. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
grinding. So like, do you, how's your head and your neck feeling? Maybe move your head around. What does that feel like right now? Well, you know what? I kind of need to rub my hands here for a moment. And then you invite into, okay, well, it was going to be supper time. How are you feeling about that? And then moving into that versus it's supper time and you have the kid just going, no, but they don't know
Whoa.
why.
Yeah.
They don't feel good. They just don't feel good.
I've been talking a lot recently with people about gaming and about young people and their games. And I was chatting to a mum just the other day who was talking about how games work, and this was new to me because I remember when I was growing up. I'm a little bit old now, and we had a Nintendo, and we used to play. Like it was Mario Brothers on it, and what you could do with that, if it was dinner time or tea time or bedtime or whatever time it was that we were going to then change activities and do something different, we could pause that game, and it would
Oh,
save it, and then you could go back to it the next time. But what I learned the other day was that that's not how these online games work anymore. You
right.
can't pause the game, and if you're about to get 50,000 points because you've spent an hour working towards an objective in your game, and your mum goes, it's tea time, you need to stop right now, you're like, mother, I'm about to get 50,000 points that I've spent an hour trying to get, and you're going to take me away from it now. And I had this realization
Oh,
about
wow.
the massive level of anxiety that could
Huge,
cause somebody
huge.
you're not going to get to finish that bit that you've been working. That would
Uh-huh.
drive me insane. I like to
Absolutely
finish.
insane.
Oh, this is why I'm really glad that I've never got into gaming, because I'd never leave. I'd be completely
Never get off.
addicted.
We would never
But
see you again.
it's a bit like when you're in the queue at the post office, and you're second in line. You're about to get to the front. You're about to drop off these parcels that are weighing you down. You're about to do whatever you need to do in the post office, and then they say, sorry, this queue line is being closed. We're opening another one. You have to get to the back of the queue, and you're back in 10th place again. The
Oh,
frustration is so much
huge
higher, isn't it,
frustration.
when you
Oh, yeah.
get to
Nearly there.
nearly get to
Yeah.
achieve your objective,
Yeah.
and then it all stops and you have
Oh,
to go back to the
patient.
queue. And this is kind of what we're doing to our kids, isn't it? We're putting them in this fantasy world where they can really
Mhm.
escape and play and strategize and have all these amazing experiences and work towards objectives. And just as they're about to get to the next objective, the next exciting bit, the next exciting door that's going to open into the next part of the game, it's tea time, and they have to stop.
Yes.
Like this happens to every teenager that I know. Every mum who has a teenager in the world right now is battling to get teenagers who are into gaming out of their bedrooms and into a more sociable setting, be it to have a meal together as a family. Would you be able to work with these kinds of people with what
Oh,
you
yeah,
do?
we
So
do. With screens is very common. My feeling about screens is that it's fine so long as we're not having any issues. My kids use screens. Screens aren't going away.
no.
So it's creating healthy boundaries around them, but not controlling the screens, because that's just going to lead into these big blowouts. We're before the video game stuff in my house. So I have to tell people, this is how I think, but I haven't had to go through as a parent. So we might have some workarounds. I actually had a follow-up phone call this morning because I'm helping with a teenager with his sleep. And but because he's gaming very, very, very late at night, and then he's so wired from it, he just doesn't fall back ever. He falls asleep around 4 or 5, but needs to be up to go to college. So we're really having to work on, I don't think his game should be taken away, as another family support worker brought up. It's also unrealistic, because then if he goes to live on his own at some point, he might want those games. So why don't we help create healthy habits around it? It might need to be that we talk about the timing, which can get tricky and do, but he's in this, and this after school. He's in this sports, this is the only time downtime. So it kind of has to be into discussions of, what priorities, and really sitting with the child over a while, what priorities do you have? Do you want to be in all these anymore school activities every single day? Do you need to be in them every single day? Because you also want to be on your gaming, and we want you to, I think coming from the place of sharing with your child, like, we want you to enjoy this. We want you to be able to do this.
Yeah.
We just
And I
aren't
think
sure
there's a
how to do
lot
it in a safe
a
way.
lot of educational benefits as well that these
Absolutely.
strategy games can
Eye
bring. There's
coordination,
so many
strategizing with
positive
people.
things. Yeah,
A lot of people
exactly.
later on go on to work from home and use their screen to do that. So I think the idea of, oh, but they're going to need to learn to work in an office, not necessarily. And a lot of neurodivergent people don't want to.
Yeah,
So again,
absolutely.
so hence my thought of, I just think that's too controlling and sets up people in opposition in the house to say, take it away. When it's affecting sleep and affecting the health, trying to come back to the teenager of, we need to get your health back in line. And typically with that also ends up being some depressions, usually some anxieties there, because they simply don't feel well. So I try to go from that angle, and discussions of, well, when do you feel comfortable doing it? And you know what, it might be in the morning. But then so long as there's not an issue going off to school, it might be that we work on your sleep to where you're going to bed much, much earlier in the night, to where if you want to wake up, set your alarm 45 minutes earlier to do it before you go off to school. I have no problem with that, because for me to regulate before I go off to work or work with a client, I like to do something active. You might like to do something gaming because that makes you feel good. I don't really care what it is, so
So
long as
you could actually use the gaming as a part of the regulation process.
people do.
Um,
People
People do.
absolutely do.
Yeah.
And I think it comes into understanding the boundaries of, you're still going to need to go to school. So is my kid going to now fight to get off of it to go to school? It just might need to be that the boundary is more of a time, but allowing the child, when we take away the shoulds and a lot of control aspects of boundaries. I actually just posted on Instagram today, because of the last few days, there was a lot of input from some other support workers for families about things that were it was just control. And that's why
Yeah.
you have so much pushback, especially with neurodivergent people really need to maintain control and
Yes.
autonomy. And if you say, you have to get off of it at this exact time, or you're not allowed to,
Everybody needs to feel like they're in
you just,
control of their own lives, not
you're
just
not,
neurodivergent people.
absolutely.
Everybody.
So they're not going to listen to you. And
I don't
then,
want to be controlled.
no, absolutely not. So we just need to figure out how to maybe make that timing, and maybe an understanding of how long will it take you. You need to maybe communicate with me ahead of time before you get on the game. What is your goal tonight on your game? How long will that take? Or do
And
you
then
not
maybe,
know?
use
And
it
we
as a
might need to figure,
challenge yourself. Like,
and
you're only
then,
going to have an hour to reach that objective. If you're not going to do it today, it might be that you have to return to that, I don't know, another day. Because the lady was telling me that the games just continue on 24 hours a day,
we
7 days
do.
a week. They never
And
end. So
they
you could
never
get back
end.
to the game and loads of things have happened. You have to kind of
Absolutely.
catch up
That
with what's going
fear
on.
of missing out is really, really strong with ADHDers. So then you have that, and then you can pretend you're not tired, all that stuff of how you have a harder time feeling yourself. So you can go those hours and hours and hours without then having your supper, having your tea, showering, sleeping, water,
Yeah.
because you're so engrossed in this game, the hyper focus, which that's fantastic that you can hyper focus for that long. But we need to
Yeah.
make sure you're safe and healthy.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm still figuring out a lot more strategies, but when it comes into a one-to-one with families, we're usually figuring out another one where it's often disrupting is the family meal time. However, I often tell families there's also the idea of that's also a should, and that what's the purpose of you all eating together? And the answer typically is, well, in order to see one another and spend some quality time together and have a chance to talk. It's like, well, if that game for your child, and you've talked about the boundaries ahead of time, but something unforeseen happened, it might take an extra 5-10 minutes. I would be keen to say to my kid, fine, we're going to finish that up. You join when you can. How about this? If you're not down for most of the dinner, I want to make an herbal tea. Will you sit with me though when we have tea, so I can make sure I see you? It's just the point of making sure you connect with the kid. You can do it in different ways. And again, often these families, neurodivergent families, not everyone has the same needs. You might have the kid that needs to move a lot at supper time. So this idea of just sitting down to dinner can cause a lot of anxiety in and of itself. You might
Mm.
have someone that needs to stand at the table or have their wobble board at the table, and somebody else might need to kind of come and go. But with the way that I help build in the segmentation, we build in a lot of family time other times. And so it's like, we kind of have to let some of those things go with who we are and just really make sure we find connection at some other point then.
It's letting go of that rigidity, isn't it?
Yes,
And being fluid and flexible and having really good communication.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea.
your teenagers time
And
because of when
family time could be, let's all go for a walk together, or
yeah,
let's all watch a movie together, or
we yeah,
let's just drink tea and have some family time in the kitchen at a different time. You can have family time in other
absolutely,
ways. It doesn't have to be just sitting at the dinner table, I
yeah.
suppose.
One of the
Sleep
biggest things,
is one of the areas that you work on. Really, sleep is so important, isn't it? I was talking about sleep before Christmas on the show, and I forget the statistics now, but there's just a phenomenal amount of people who are not getting a good night's sleep, and
I know,
poor sleep can lead to so many problems, and health issues. Like increased risk of heart disease, increased risk of diabetes, increased risk of weight gain, but in the immediate, lack of focus,
oh, yeah.
irritation,
Yes,
so
increase
many things.
control
Sleep is
everything
so
and everybody.
important. And you're
Yeah,
about to qualify as a sleep practitioner as well, aren't you?
yes,
Uh,
yes.
yeah, it's great that you're doing that work. Tell me a little bit more about the handbook that you've created, because you've created this handbook, haven't you?
I
To
did, and it
help
will be available
sleep.
soon. I want to officially wait till I finish the last course day. So I'm working with case studies now. Sleep immediately, the very first consult I did ended up being about sleep. So I've been helping families with sleep. I felt like for myself, I don't want the imposter syndrome. So some more coursework. And I also am very interested in helping create ideas around that not knowing that we might be a bit different. And so the sleep handbook really comes from, it's very grounded in, you basically can't get me without going through understanding regulating. So even though we might be discussing sleep, the handbook goes through all the stuff to help with segmentation, all the stuff around the family connections, because that's how our day goes affects our night affects the day. And I don't want
Yes.
to ever work with someone with leaving them, because really at the root of it, and thinking of my reason to work in Kokopie is children's mental health. And I'm not doing my job if I don't help the child learning their triggers and learning to regulate and learning how to have, however they communicate, be strengthened and validated. So it's still always based on that. Also, a huge one for me is security and attachment, um, because of lack of social acceptance or lack of understanding yourself, lack of recognizing social hierarchy. There's a lot of reasons why kids, teenagers, and adults may have some security and attachment issues. And then, so even with just thinking of my youngest, he is a very independent 3-year-old that does not want hugs and kisses and does not like to cuddle, except if it's nighttime. If it's at nighttime, that's when he really is vulnerable. And to me, it feels like I would not be respecting who he is by saying, you must sleep in your room by yourself. He has never been able to sleep by himself. He and his brother now share a room. That was the decision they made, because that's where he feels secure. He still ends up with us. And so the way I go about sleep is, I do not think the crying out. I also won't work with babies, because I think babies should be getting up and should be eating. And for their safety, they should be getting up. So I work with children through teenage. Often, again, the family action plans, though, include a lot. That's the parent stuff. And it ends up
Yeah.
for and then, where was I? Oh,
Working with children and teenagers to
and the
support
attachment.
families as part of that package, that
Yes.
program that you
So
provide.
my focus is on making sure we are meeting all those needs during the day of
Mm.
regulating from executive function overload, sensory overload, physical needs, and therefore setting yourselves up for the night. And then also realizing what kind of sleep needs are there actually needed here, because kids are very, very different, and neurodivergent kids sometimes need a lot more sleep than the average child. And some kids need a lot less. And if
Mm.
you're trying to force a kid to sleep at certain times, you're going to get a lot of disrupted sleep cycles. So,
Yes.
and the whole basis of mine is I'm still absolutely wonderfully okay with parents remaining the children's security. And as much
Yes.
as
Until the time that that child feels confident enough to take a step back.
absolutely, it's perfectly acceptable, it's normal, and
Yes.
and so it's more of helping families realize to get this manageable night and a realistic night, and making sure we're meeting needs still at night, but not waking up because of what could be considered unnecessary, because of we're going to bed too early, we're going to bed too late, where the screen times maybe a little bit too close to bedtime, or we didn't get rid of sensory input.
Mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm.
create a lot of different skills for all of that. So I want to help get rid of all those reasons of
So
waking up.
I talk about sleep hygiene with
Yeah,
people. You know,
hygiene.
like you prepare to go to bed, you clean your teeth, you wash your face, you have a shower, whatever you do at the end of the night. We also need to have a little bit of disconnect time, don't we, from the screens, from the noises, from the things that are stimulating us constantly, and just
Yeah.
kind of step into that. We call it the hypnagogic state, to start to build up that hypnagogic energy. You know, when you start to feel a little bit tired, I'm a little bit tired
Yeah,
now.
for
And
sure.
the amount of people I know who say I'm a little bit tired now, so I think I'll go to bed and spend an hour on Facebook scrolling and chatting.
A little bit different.
And it's too stimulating.
It is. So yeah, so I ended up what ended up happening is my very first case study. I started to put together the template of the family action plans, and I realized there was all this information I wanted to make sure they get. And if you've ever
Yes.
one of my workshops, whatever, I would just give you the basically a book every time, because I want to make sure people know they can always go back, they can always refer back, because sometimes when you hear something the first time, you're just still processing it, and maybe you miss the next thing that's said.
Mm,
Or that way you just feel confident you can go back. So what I did is all of that detail and all of that reasoning got put into this handbook that I then give
amazing.
alongside it. And after we've done like assessments, then we can go through different sections and create action plans around all of it, while
Mm,
making sure the family feels like that's doable for us. We
yeah.
agree with that feels respectful. We might have to still do wiggle room. And then I create those action plans and then the new routines. And in there is that family meditation times, which again, especially for families,
Such
if
a great thing to do.
time is just absolutely catastrophic, because someone just doesn't feel hungry, someone is having trouble getting from this, but yet again, like maybe you went for that walk. We do a lot of teaching the regulating segments in the evening you can do together, and then making sure that family meditation time also includes ways of getting rid of especially sensory input and giving the appropriate sensory input. And it increases that amount of time before bed, and all the stress of the day. Again, like you said, just creating this time of preparing yourself for bedtime and doing it in a way that respects each person and what all those different needs are. And sleep just happens more naturally, and we don't have to get into
we
then
we
leading
we
kids
automatically go
themselves.
into the brain waves, don't we?
Uh,
If we can go from alpha and beta brainwave, which is kind of
yeah,
where we are when we're chatting and living, if we can use meditation to take us down into a
yeah,
theta kind of brain. Would you say theta because you're American?
yeah.
I always, I've done some American training as well, and I always go theta, 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 theta. I never know how to pronounce it, but it
Now
takes
I
you
don't know
that
what to say.
those lower brain waves, which are just one above deep sleep. So
Yes,
you're training your brain to bring it down
yes,
into that place of healing. It's a place where you process the day. It's a
yes,
place where you assimilate the building blocks of the things that you've learned, the good things things, the bad things, the part of the brain, the amygdala at the back that processes the traumas and the
Yes.
stresses and strains in a healthy way.
Yes.
It gives the brain time to do that. And it's a family activity. I think family
Yeah.
meditation time is a brilliant idea.
Yes. And you can,
Absolutely brilliant idea. Such a simple thing. What I love about what you do is that you just implement very doable, very easy, very simple strategies. Now, I know that you also, as well as working with families, you also work with therapists and practitioners and caregivers and support workers and people who work in child educational settings as well. I'm very blessed because I work in Harrogate as well as up here in South Shields, and so I have access to some of your training days. And I've not been able to get on any yet, but I've read
okay.
them and they all look amazing. I'm
Thank
dying
you.
to get on to some of your workshops and training courses that you do. And there was one that you do particularly that was really interesting called Getting to Know Autistic Children. And it was all about just understanding that difference, those
Yeah.
understanding how people perceive the world differently.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
The formal coursework in a lovely way. It's all online as well. So that's at the kokopiefamilies.com, KOKOPIE families.com. So that way, if you're not here in Harrogate, then you can go online, self-paced courses, your certificates go through that. I belong to associations that peer review and give them hours. So you can get continuing professional development hours. That
Brilliant.
course is kind of my way of wanting to help teach the language, help going from thinking of us as having symptoms to traits, and it's our culture. And I want nannies and childminders and teachers and senkos, and I actually have it was more for the educational area and practitioners, but I do have parents take it, or they'll ask if a grandparent will take it, because
Right.
it teaches autism from an autistic person has written it, so it's from a autism positive space, um,
Mm,
while at the same time introducing why we might get anxious, why we might feel some of these challenging areas. I'm not trying to gloss over the fact that we have challenges, but it's understanding, respecting us as people and your child, and that actually there's a whole bunch of us out here that you can come to the autistic community to learn from.
mm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and, and in the meantime, you can get a certificate and continuing professional development hours, which,
Amazing.
yeah.
I see as a clinical hypnotherapist, I see a lot of people who come. They present with. I'll give you an example. I worked with a lady who came to see me because she was suffering with anxiety, and on finding a little bit more about why, what was causing the anxiety. She hadn't had any negative experiences. Nothing bad had particularly happened to her in her life. There was no kind of root cause there. What was happening was the noise from the people who were living to the left and to the right of her. The noise from people who were living above and below her was freaking her out completely. And she'd moved house about 10 times, and it was falling out with her neighbours every time she moved because she was
Oh,
constantly going around and asking them to be quiet. And I had a conversation with you. We'd been for coffee in a cafe, and we were talking about noise, just really briefly. And it was
oh,
at that time when I was seeing her, and I thought, oh my goodness, she's potentially neurodiverse. And I had a conversation with her about it. And now she gets these noise cancelling headphones
oh, your
and has an
defender.
amazing life.
Oh,
Has an
changes your
amazing
life.
life.
Changes your life.
Completely life changing. And as a therapist, I want to have an inclusive practice. I want to have an awareness of what might be coming through my door, so I can really help people. And I know that you're all about inclusion and about that inclusive practice. Tell me a little bit more about creating a successful and inclusive practice.
Yes, I wrote that course, and it's now live as of just a couple days ago on the Kokopies families. Yes,
Congratulations.
thank
It's
you.
amazing.
Coding takes me forever because I don't like it.
I just have to hire someone else to do
Oh,
it. There's no way
I
I could
want
do
to get
that.
to that point. I also wanted to struggle through it to feel like it was mine, especially my courses in the beginning, and to know what I
Yes.
would want to hire for later. Um, so that course was really, because of being a nurse and a practitioner myself, one of my goals is to help teach my own demographic about who we are. And I'm actually speaking at my alma mater, UCLA, in April about autistic identity and shifting research objective goals. And so this course follows from that of teaching practitioners. It always starts with language, understanding what does neurodiversity mean, understanding identity first language, like we've talked about today, that I'm this, so therefore if you respect who I am as a person, it's so much easier to understand than how you can help me. So then we flow through in that course into understanding that what we're actually really interested in, and we would love lots of people to research, is neurodivergent people live with a lot more physical and mental comorbid issues. And therefore we actually would greatly benefit from being able to get to all these different practitioners like yourself, or if it was for massage, if we could get acupuncture, just help because of migraines is so common, connective tissue issues, so lots of joint pain.
I mean, if you're living in a world which is more stimulating and more
Yeah,
stressful, you're going to have higher releases of adrenaline, higher releases of
really.
cortisol, and that's
Anxiety,
going to cause dull ache sensations in the muscles. You're gonna have more tension in the neck and shoulders, definitely more tightness in the neck, more headaches. Quite often that can lead to visual disturbances as well, which I can imagine would be horrific if
yeah,
you were neurodiverse. And a multitude of other things, digestive problems that could all
yeah,
really be solved
yeah.
with meditation, with hypnotherapy, with acupuncture, with massage. So it's really, yeah, definitely important as therapists that we can
So yeah,
talk
it's
to
that idea of
people about this.
if you're more, it's that idea of if I know a practitioner's more accepting of who I am, I'm much more likely to go and open up and share.
Yeah,
I go in the course of how it's a challenge because most of us adults are unidentified. So then the bulk of the paper and the course is about changes and suggestions to do in your practice, which actually then needs to be basically for everybody, because you might not, the person may not know, might not be aware, maybe like me and go over, 30 something years going around like la di da, and if someone brought up autism and be like, no idea what that is, but it's not me. Um, and then, and then there's what was I bringing? Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought
that's all
there.
right. The course on
Oh,
inclusive practitioner.
going into
Mm,
for everybody, because also, or you may have
mm,
someone that knows their identity, but it does not want to divulge it,
of
because
course.
even as I've been divulging it and to some different practitioners, I have not had the best experience.
No.
And I realize there's some people I will not go back to.
Yeah.
It's not respectful care. And if I can't be in your practice and feel respected as a person, how am I going to benefit from you at all? Or how am I even going to go in for, if I need my hearing assessed, if I need a vision test, I'm just going
Yeah.
to be in there stressed out and not feeling very good. I'm not going to be
Mm,
as honest in my answers. I'm not going to then divulge as much information you might need to do a better job for me.
yeah.
So I just thought the
And
course
it's
was,
up to us, isn't it, as practitioners? It's up to us as practitioners to get that continuing professional development in place so that we can support all of the people in our communities, and be an inclusive practice. So we can do this course online
you can
as
do it
well.
online right now.
But I know you've got some dates in the diary where it's
Eh,
available in person. Tell when can
That
we
is
do
perfect.
this?
Yes. So this June's going to be lots of fun because it's also Pride. And a committee member for Pride. So June for
Oh
me, I
yeah,
think,
you're doing the Pride thing in
oh
the
yes,
park, aren't
oh,
you?
it's just going to be such a fun month because it's going to be all
Mm,
about diversity and everyone loving everybody. But the course that I'm teaching in person, June 28th, Sunday, basically going to be kind of an all-day course, and it's going to be at the, oh, I say it, is it Well House Yoga? I get,
yes, Well House
yeah,
Yoga
well,
Space.
I kind of say the name slightly wrong. You to book in, you just have to message me. So if you find me on Facebook or Instagram, it'd be KOKOPIE families, either on Facebook or
Cocoa
Instagram.
Pie
Yeah.
Families.
And essentially you will get the course, the workbook. You get me in person answering a bunch of questions. We'll go through anything and everything you need. I'm
And just because I am a continuing professional development fanatic,
yes.
like I only have to do 20 hours a year. I think I do that a month. I love continuing. I'm like, I need to learn more. How
Yeah.
many hours of continuing professional development can you sign off if you're a therapist and you come and attend that course?
Hours.
6.
6 hours.
6 hours. So it's 6 hours of CPD and all that amazing information.
It's gonna be quite a lot. I'm hoping we have time to kind of expand more into the kids area as well, just because that naturally happens. So I'm hoping everyone leaves with quite a big understanding. And then, as you know, I'm quite available, and you can always pop questions into the closed Kokopie families
Yeah,
group
you
for
are.
online
You are
discussion.
available. Mm.
So I want everyone to know it's quite an ongoing conversation, and understanding people often need to sit and process things.
So that's June the 28th at Wellhouse Yoga Space, which is just on the outskirts of Harrogate. And if people want to come and do that course in person, they can do that. They just need to get in touch with you via your Cocoa Pies Facebook page. But actually, that course is available online as well. So if you're not, we have listeners all over the world. So if you're not in the UK, in the Harrogate area, you can't get there on the 28th of June, but you really want to do that training, and have an inclusive practice, you can also do that online. So we'll pop all those details on the Radio Shills Facebook page as well, so that people can find that. And I could talk to you all day. But we need to play some music and have some other guests on too.
Yeah.
Laura, thank you so much
Oh,
for your
thank you
time.
so
Thank you for the work that you do. There are so many families and parents and caregivers out there who really massively struggle with these things, and this work that you're doing is so needed. And it's just wonderful. I feel absolutely honoured to have met you in person, but I feel really honoured to have had you on the show tonight. Thank you so
mutual.
much.
I adore you. Thank you for everything you do.
All right. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
play a little bit of music just now.